Hello. Hello, and welcome to the Power of Media. My name is Kara Reedy. I'm the moderator for this panel, and I'm the director of the Disabled Journalists Association. It's newly formed. I have a couple of announcements on the top. If you click on session on the right-hand side of the screen and then click comments to chat with other attendees and participants, or Q&A to ask questions of the participants, people will be monitoring the chat for you, and if anyone, they'll be monitoring the chat, and so at the end we'll be able to answer any questions. Also, let's see, if you look at the bottom of the screen, there is a button for closed captioning. If you click on that, we have closed captioning today. I'm going to start off by telling a story about the power of media in my life. So storytelling is bridge building. It's the gateway to understanding. It is power. I spent 10 years at CNN feeling unheard. People would pretend to listen to me, and I'm not even sure if they knew they were pretending. Ableism is so wrapped in our society that it's sometimes hard to detect. Mix racism and ableism, and it becomes a soupy mess that the person who's experiencing it even has a hard time defining the discrimination they're experiencing. That was me. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't figure out why people were so opposed to me telling stories at CNN. It was okay for me to write part-time, but my job at CNN was to take care of the real journalists. That was drilled into me. Defer. Understand that you are less than. And if you do well writing or producing, that doesn't change your qualifications or lack thereof. I didn't give up, though, and I kept trying to change their minds. Realizing there was a gap in coverage around disability, I said, you know what? I'm disabled. Who would be a better person than me to tell those stories? So I started pitching disability stories to anyone who would listen. I came close to getting one approved. It was about the disability tax, the tax that disabled people have to pay in order to make this inaccessible world accessible for our bodies. We have to build our own infrastructure wherever we go, and that eats into our already tight budgets. So a huge portion of us, CRIPs, are relegated to poverty for life. I felt like I'd stumbled on something. My editor also felt like I had stumbled onto something. She was so excited about the pitch. So she took it to the executive editor to get clearance to actually start on the work. His response to our pitch was, no one cares about that. 26% of the population, no one cares about, apparently. And so in that moment, I realized it's not me. For some reason, whether they know it or not, these editors are letting their bigotry define 26% of the population, define the narrative around 26% of the population. And as a result of that, me too. They didn't believe we, disabled people, should have access to the power of media. We weren't supposed to control our narrative. It was an aha moment for me. I realized I wasn't the unqualified person in this situation. Everyone else was. That's a huge revelation to someone who has been moving around the world believing they weren't qualified. It also made it clear I was never going to change their minds inside the system. I had to leave in order to have power to tell the stories of my people. To win the narrative war is the most powerful tool any group of people can have. Thank you. And I'm going to now invite Danae Escadavarino, and she is an award-winning Latina serial entrepreneur, speaker, and community builder. As CEO of boutique a boutique digital agency, Luna Soul Media, she connects brands to Latina consumers, delivering millions of leads and sales to her clients. A Cuban immigrant and the daughter of a political prisoner, Danae is fiercely passionate about elevating the Latino community. As a founder of Latina Meetup, she has introduced thousands of Latina brands to millions of consumers. As founder of Amigos, she has facilitated hundreds of job recruitments, grants, scholarships, and other resources for Latino professionals. I'd like to welcome the 2022 Passionistas Persist Vanguard Award winner, Danae Escanavarino.
Thank you so much, Kara. And thank you, Amy and Nancy, for this magical space, beautiful community. I'm so thrilled to be here. Sorry, that's my monster puppy who wants to be heard too. So I'll just jump right in. I recently had an argument about Fidel Castro. Hear me out. It's not about his dictatorship or how he destroyed Cuba, made it communist and making it the only country that went from being a developed nation into a third world status country. I know I'm a little passionate about that, but that wasn't my conversation. I was arguing with a friend who is a Latino named Miguel about John Leguizamo and how he slammed James Franco for being cast as Fidel Castro in an upcoming movie because he's not Latino. And Leguizamo even called for a boycott of the movie. I told Miguel, I disagree. He clutched his proverbial pearls and proceeded to call me a traitor to my own people. You know what happens. It's the part in the conversation where any healthy debate gets shut down because someone makes assumptions, calls the other one a name, the parties all retreat into their self-righteous corners. I didn't want to do that because I hate problems that not only focus on the problem, but I hate situations that only focus on problems and you don't get to discuss the solutions. I'm very much into solutions and also not a fan of the pearl clutching. So I took a deep breath and proceeded to have an actual conversation with Miguel to figure out the real problem in the situation and discuss solutions. You see, the problem isn't really that Franco isn't Latino. He, as an actor, should be able to do what he does best. His craft is essentially to convince us that he is someone he is not, that he is the character he is portraying. What would happen if we painted every single movie with that brush? We would have no Al Pacino and Scarface. I mean, listen, I'm a Cuban American. I was born in Cuba. I am proud of and fully steeped into the richness and beauty of my culture. I love that movie. And so do most Cubans. There would be no award-winning performance by Tom Hanks of A Gay Man in Philadelphia, no Viggo Mortensen in Carlito's Way as Lalin, no Hank Azaria as Agador Spartacus, the gay Guatemalan houseboy in Birdcage, one of my all-time favorite movies. Hank is neither gay nor Guatemalan. And speaking of Cubans, Ana de Armas is playing Marilyn Monroe in a movie. Does she not get to play Marilyn because she is neither a white, blonde woman? So when I rattled all of these off to Miguel, and I had a huge list, thanks to Google, he just spit out the usual arguments about a lack of diversity in Hollywood. Bingo. That is the problem. Latinos account for only about 5% of main cast members in TV and film, despite being roughly 20% of the population. We're talking 60 million strong. It has been the same for the last 10 years. Even though we represent 20% of the population, we only get about 5% of the cast members in TV and film. Can we say scarcity? So yes, when a non-Latino like James Franco gets tapped to play a character who is Latino, that scarcity mindset takes a hold of us and all we see is, oh, look, another white dude getting our Latino roles, right? What we should be doing is casting so many Latinos that this fighting over who is and who isn't Latino and who gets what roles doesn't continue to cloud the issue. The lack of diversity. And I'm not just talking about Latino characters or Latino actors playing the maid or the gangster or the ex-con or the overly sexy Latina, right? Latinos can play the lead roles. They can be the attorney. They can be the private investigator or the beautiful career woman in a rom-com who eventually realizes that she's in love with the guy she purportedly hates, right? And it's not just the same damn Latinos. No offense to these fabulous stars who have most certainly paved the way. But we do have more talent than just J-Lo, Leguizamo, Eva Longoria, Andy Garcia, Sofia Vergara. You know, you get the gist of what I'm saying. In fact, yesterday, I was at a networking event where the icebreaker was, hey, who would you like to play you in a movie about your life? If you ask someone who is non-diverse that question, they have a huge pool of actors to pick from. In our networking event, which was a Latino networking event, the women all chose Salma Hayek, J-Lo, Penelope Cruz, Sofia Vergara. And we're talking about probably 25, 30 people. The men chose John Leguizamo and Javier Bardem. So no, we don't need non-Latinos being boycotted. We just need more Latinos playing all types of roles. Get rid of the scarcity and the scarcity mindset. The real solution is more Latinos in all types of roles, including the decision-making ones. And this applies everywhere, not just Hollywood. More Latinos in the boardroom, more Latinos in the news, and not just Spanish language media. More Latinos in tech and marketing, advertising, biosciences. More Latino startups getting funding to match the fact that we create businesses at a rate of 44% more than any other group, but our funding is like half of that, right? And that's why I created Amigos. It's a Latino professional community whose focus is abundance, opportunities, and elevation, and helping each other, and not on scarcity. And can we please stop clutching our damn pearls so we can hear each other out and work together to find the real solutions to real problems? Gracias.
Hi, thank you, Danae. Our next storyteller is Shilpa Suntankar. She's a screenwriter, director, and producer with a drive for stories about different cultures in coexistence. Thanks to her background as an Indian American woman raised in the cowboy country of Colorado, she graduated from New York's Tisch School of the Arts after interning for BBC London and attending the 35mm filmmaking masterclass at FAMU in Prague. Her recent short film, Working Lunch, inspired by the proliferation of hate graffiti after the 2016 US presidential election, premiered at the Toronto South Asian Film Festival and received a Regional Arts and Culture Council project grant. Shilpa?
Hi there. Yeah, I'm Shilpa Suntankar. And thank you so much, Passionistas, for putting this great summit together, full of inspiring women and non-binary folks, and having me on board with this very inspiring group of ladies. I'm in admiration of you other two, and really grateful to be here to have this conversation with you guys. So yeah, I'm a filmmaker, writer, director, producer with a production company of my own here in Portland, Oregon called Pushstart Productions. And I've worked on a lot of different kinds of production, feature films, commercials, a lot of animation here in Portland. And yes, I do make my own films. I have several award-winning short films. Right now, I actually have a short film I created with Montevilla Jazz that's sort of a multicultural dance extravaganza in combination with jazz. That I'll probably be looking to get into the next festival circuit this next coming year. And I also have a number of award-winning feature scripts. I'm also developing my first feature. which will be one of two films, one of which is a cross-cultural thriller that takes place on the U.S.-Mexico border. And the other one is a little more dramatic with some thriller elements. It's about two Indian American sisters growing up in Middle America. And as you can tell from my details on my own projects thus far, I'm a filmmaker who is really driven by stories about, like, as Kara said, different cultures in coexistence, that cross-cultural experience. Shouldn't be surprising, being that Indian American growing up in cowboy country. And that's just kind of been the story of my life, living across the bridge between cultures and trying to be, being a woman, trying to seek a foothold in a mainly male-dominated industry. So when I think of the power of media, I think of that power as the ability to amplify individual voices, make a bigger platform out of someone's vision. As media makers, I think we have a unique capability to make sight and sound creations that ultimately generate emotions in people. We make people feel. I think it's a unique privilege, because if we can make people feel, then we can make people act on those feelings or have them comprehend how those feelings are occurring in others. To me, that is power. That's powerful. It's the ability to move people to action. The issue, as we all know, I'm preaching to the choir here, is currently that majority voice that holds the power today is still that of the Caucasian male. So it is that perspective who is getting people to feel, driving the cultural mindset. And that is because, for the most part, they still own all the creative. Women fall under 20% of all film directors in the US, which is down from 2020. Women directors of color make up only about 2% or something like that. Commercial directing is more disheartening at around 7% women. And even more abysmal is in agencies, where even though women pretty much still control a whopping 80% of consumer spending, they only make up about 3% of creative directors in the agencies developing the marketing for them. And the percentages range around 10% or less of that number for various people of color demographics. So I think we've all kind of gotten pieces of this over the last couple years as revelations have been coming to us in the zeitgeist. But here's a little of about my story, I think, and how I came to figuring out where I fit in all of this over the course of my life. So I grew up in small town Colorado in an Indian American household. My mother, being a doctor, was kind of the main breadwinner. And if you know anything about Indian culture, you know it's a big movie culture. So it has been and still is, I believe, the biggest producer of movies on the planet in terms of number of movies per year. So you get the idea. I had themes of strong women and movies in my life pretty much from the get-go. In my own personal work, for a long time, I really focused on great stories, just making really compelling stories that are well crafted. More recently, a certain significant event happened that I think we all know about that sort of changed my mind about how I'm creating and how I'm thinking of those things, and exactly how I should be using that talent. And that event was, we all know it and love it, the event of President Trump getting elected in 2016. The reason why this affected me so much wasn't simply the event itself of half the country choosing him and his policies and his leadership, whatever you might think of how valid the election results were. What affected me so much was the immediately hateful celebrations that occurred across our country, across social media, graffiti on minority businesses, churches, religious structures, on schools, the N-word, which I still can't bring myself to say, frankly, suddenly appeared everywhere again. Not that it ever disappeared, but now it was everywhere. People in blackface across social media, slurs telling us people of color to go home, to which I could only ever ask, where is that? Fort Collins, Colorado? Because that's where I'm from. So people telling us, Trump was going to come in and clean us out of this country. So, over the course of the next year after that happened, no less than 3 instances happened that occurred in which South Asians were shot. So that left me and my family in a place of being pretty fearful. It was as if half the country had erupted in a roar against the entire minority half of us. For me, the cat was out of the bag. I was the them and not the us in this country. For a long time, I was afraid to live in my own country. For all I knew, it was entirely possible that half the country didn't think I or my family should even be here. My mother had probably delivered more American babies into this planet with her own hands than most Americans see in a lifetime. So the idea that someone might think she didn't belong here at all was very scary to me indeed. So that's when I knew that not enough people knew or were seeing our perspective. There wasn't enough out there to tell half the country, apparently, who we were and what we were feeling and what we were doing. And that's when I truly started comprehending the importance of my voice, my experience, and my ability to do my job in making people feel. So my last short film, Working Lunch, which Kara noted, thank you, was about a couple of people of color, Republican and Democrat, going to lunch at an Indian restaurant on any regular workday after the 2016 election and finding that it has been sprayed with hate graffiti. So over the course of lunch, they have to connect and overcome their differences and decide ultimately that they're going to come together and remove the graffiti together. So that was where I started finding, through the fear, my perspective and that genuine want to relay the message that we need to get together across the aisle, across lines, and stand together against hate. I mean, no matter which way we voted, we should at least all draw the line there, right? Ultimately, it received good reception, played at festivals, received a grant. So I was very grateful that the message was received. But overall, I think in my story, that's where I am now. I'm trying to work toward making my voice truer, making sure my perspective is part of the content that's out there, that's in front of people, that's part of the zeitgeist. And I feel like that's where we're truly meant to be and what we're truly meant to do as the army of us minority and underrepresented artists. All of us can keep adding our perspective to what people are seeing. If we keep owning our creative, owning those directing roles, making people feel, then over time, millimeter by millimeter, inch by inch, maybe we can start to move the needle and start to move things in the right direction in our cultural mindset, to see us as the half of the country that we are, as minorities. I think it's obviously going to make us a bigger, better country on the whole. So that is my story.
Thank you. All right. So I have a couple of questions. I feel like all of us, because we come from a marginalized community and we're also storytellers, feel like we come to storytelling at some moment. When did you, I guess my first question is, when did you realize the power of storytelling? Like, I realized it when I was younger, and because I'm a dwarf, and I could as long as I could keep people laughing and tell stories and stuff, then they didn't focus so much on my dwarfness. They were more like, she's hilarious. And that's when I really, like, that's the nexus of where I was like, I got to do this forever because I have to control how people think of me and the storytelling. And then as I got older, obviously, I realized there was even broader power in doing it. When was your first sort of step into realizing that storytelling, and when you're younger, it's not media, but it is. It's like playground media. When did you?
Right, cartoons.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I can step right in, Danae, unless you have an answer right off the bat. I mean,
Please.
for me, it was, like I said, I started out when I was a kid already loving movies. I think it's in my blood. But I think it was when, a really good moment for me was on the making of my first short film, which was called Biography of an American Hostess. And it was literally, I wrote it myself and directed it, and I starred in it too, because there weren't many Indians in anything at that point. Now we're kind of everywhere, which is great. Frankly, I'm not complaining. But what the story was about, my actual experiences as a restaurant hostess, and it was, some of the conversations in it were actually written word for word. And to this day, I think it's still a film people love to go back to of mine. And it's something that truly touches people. And I look back on it, I'm like, oh, that shot is, and oh, what am I doing there with my face? But actually, it really connects with people. That idea of sharing that, like I said, that personal perspective and that personal story really got people to seeing, oh, that's what asking that hostess that question in an Indian restaurant feels like. Maybe I shouldn't ask that to the next waitress that I see. Now I understand what that waitress is thinking. And that I thought that was pretty powerful, that story, even when I wrote it, was, as I thought it was, as insignificant as it was, how very simply it just got into people's heads and connected with them.
Yeah, I feel like that is really what the power of like storytelling is like connecting and bridge building, when they're like, oh, I don't want someone to feel that way when I'm talking to them. That's right. Awful. Oops. And it's so much better than like I thought about what you were saying in your story, Danae, about like people not being able to like sit down and have that conversation and figure out where you connect on. Because if you can figure out where you connect on, then you can figure out how to get around where you don't. Or maybe you end up coming to some kind of, better place where you're closer. But what was the moment for you where you realized storytelling was power?
Oh man, so mine isn't quite as I don't think it's as interesting as is it Shilpa or Shilpa? Shilpa. Okay. So back in the Stone Ages, when I was teaching computing, I was teaching programming and HTML development, and I'm talking about like in the early 90s. And it was for a company that doesn't even exist anymore, CompUSA, if you guys can remember that. Okay, yeah, that's how much of a digital dinosaur I am. And so when I was teaching classes and I was teaching things like web design and HTML and programming, it's really boring stuff. Unless you're like absolutely, you geek out over it like I do. And so I found that by integrating stories and storytelling into the teaching, I was able to keep people from absolutely falling asleep right in front of me. And so I had really, really engaged students who, requested my classes more and wanted to come to my specific classes, which they had never had anybody do before that. So to me, that storytelling just seemed like, it's a great way to grab someone's attention, even if maybe your content isn't as fabulous as it probably should be. And so, yeah, it was a solution to a problem. You know me, I love those solutions. So it was a solution to the problem of boring content.
I used to, when I ran newsrooms at CNN, and I was the nag who was always like, could you not do that when you do? And so I was always sending out notes to the newsroom, please fill in your paperwork. And they were always like, whatever. So I started sending emails that were like, cupcakes at the middle table. And like anybody who's ever been in a newsroom, a journalist know that like the one way to get a journalist to pay attention to you is offer them free food. And so I was like, cupcakes at the middle table. And then I put a whole note in so that they would have to read. And I was like, just joking, there's no cupcakes. But now you know exactly what I want from you. So thank you so much. But I think also I feel like there's this other thing that, Shilpa, you talked about being an Indian American in cowboy country, which that's a lot. Which means you probably have a pretty defined code switching system in place, I would assume. I mean,
code switching meaning
like, I feel like when people are in marginalized communities and they're one of the only ones inside this community, you have your outside self and your inside self. So like you have the self that's at home, and then when you're out with the cowboy country people, you're like, I'm this other person. Like in St. Louis, for me, there's a Black accent and a white accent, and like it literally is defined by like Black people sound like they're from Mississippi, and white people sound like they're kind of from Wisconsin. So
well, I mean,
all in one city.
Yeah. I mean, I'll one up you there. I think I would even go so far as to say I probably have 3 identities, and that is the cowboy country person, and then the person I might be with my family, which maybe speaks a little bit of Marathi and understands, and then is the good Indian girl, and then my own identity that I am, as myself at like 2 a.m. in the morning when I'm staying up and I'm not supposed to, and I'm just writing or drawing, and my mom has to come in and tell me to go to bed. I'd say it was probably 3 different identities. The one I was with, my sovereign self, as well as, the one that stood on both sides of the cultural bridge. And yeah, that was a fun negotiation growing up, but I think it was, I think it provides an interesting opportunity for me now as an adult to be able to speak to all sides, of that bridge. It allows me to be that bridge builder, the communicator, and I find it gives me an advantage to kind of walk into any room and kind of see what point of view someone's coming from pretty quickly. And that's really nice. I think that's really refreshing. And I think that's useful for people because it helps people feel heard and helps stories feel understood, for lack of a better way of putting that.
No, I agree. So I asked it because I feel like as code switchers are really like
I like that term, by the way. I don't think I've heard that, code switchers. I'm gonna steal that.
So it's almost like we can sort of morph into these different spaces. And because we can, then we're not immediately picked out as being othered because we've morphed in.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You're still yourself. You still have your personal self. You still have you have all of these identities, but because you have all these identities and because you understand, you can kind of skate through, and it's not skating, but it's, you can navigate it better
Yeah,
than
you can
other
fit.
people.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Correct.
you can find a place.
Yeah,
Danae,
I
do
want
you
to
have?
say,
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm
no, that's
sorry.
okay. I want to say I've had friends that, revealed after we've been, talking for a while, they revealed that, like, they were kind of intimidated to even like come up to, they didn't know if they were going to be able to talk to me or whatever. And then I opened my mouth and I sound like some regular American from cowboy country. And suddenly suddenly the view of me changes entirely, So
Yes.
code switching. Who knew?
Danae, do you have experiences like that where you can kind of use your multiple selves to go in and out? And
Oh yeah. Code switching has been my thing forever. Well, first of all, I grew up, so I'm a Cuban immigrant. I came over when I was a little girl. I grew up in a part of South Florida that was a little bit north of Miami, where I was one of like 3 token Latino families. Um, but it was still, it was still the projects. It was just a black and white project, not really a Latino project. Um, so that's where I grew up. And then when I was a teenager, we moved to Miami where it was all Latinos. And so I sound like this, right? Which isn't really very Latina. But when I would go to Miami, all of a sudden everybody looked like me, but they didn't sound like me. And so I ended up learning how to sound more Latina. Um, and then when I went into the tech world, right, that was all just, a bunch of white dudes programming. And so I had to code switch there and be completely different there. So yeah, I'm so familiar with code switching. Now, as I've gotten older, I'm 47. I've learned the wisdom of being your authentic self. So I wear my Latinidad as the proud banner, of who I am. It's a big part of who I am. I celebrate it. I raised my kids to also celebrate it. I live in Williamsburg, Virginia, by the way, which is like the least diverse place on the planet. It's pretty ironic, but I have taught my children to wear their ethnicity as a badge of honor, to teach people to be, to be the ambassadors for diversity and for showing people that, number one, we're 100% American. And number two, it's okay to be authentically diverse. I believe it was Cesar Chavez who said, celebrating your individual diversity does not mean that you're not part of the grander picture, right, of being human beings. And I know I'm paraphrasing it terribly, but the point is that you can do both. And I don't think you have to do either or. And I look forward to a day when code switching is just not a thing anymore, because it is very, very common for anybody of any diverse background. If you want to fit in somewhere, you kind of have to, mold yourself into that little box so that you feel more accepted by everybody else who's trying to fit into that same little box. So yeah, I definitely had a lot of experience with code switching. Not a fan, but it's a necessity, and I look forward to the day when it's no longer a necessity.
yeah, I mean, it's interesting here because I grew up in New York. I live in New York most of the time. I'm in St. Louis right now, but in St. Louis, I feel much more the need to code switch. In New York, I'm like, nobody cares. Like everybody, like that's what makes New York, New York, is that you can go down the street and you hear salsa, and then 2 seconds later it's reggae, and like there's just culture is just dripping out of everywhere, and that's what makes it great. But here, I feel like I still have to navigate it in a way that I don't other places, and it does change who you are, though. Like, it does, because I find in New York, I'm a little freer. I just go about my day and I'm myself. And also with my own like dwarf identity in New York, when someone says something off color to me, because I'm in New York, I can respond in also off color. And then it feels like the playing field is much more level. Whereas here, it's so passive aggressive. Someone will say something, so then I have to like calculate it in my brain how to make a really horrible passive aggressive dig back at them, which just seems way more complicated than being like F off. Which is much more freeing. So I can we talk a little bit about like obstacles that you've encountered in sort of bridging those, being the bridge to the storytelling? It doesn't necessarily have to be people, but I have had a lot of people in my life that have been obstacles that I've had to go around. But there's also just been situations where I knew the story needed to be told, or I knew that there was sort of like a disconnect that was keeping people apart and the story wasn't getting out. Can we talk a little bit about like obstacles that you've had to overcome to get that out, to get your story out?
Sure. Danae, do you want to start, or?
I can jump in if you, either way. It's Danae, by the way. I keep forgetting
Danae, sorry about that.
You're fine. You're fine. But I can jump in unless you have something real quick.
I mean, I have something I can, a quick answer for sure, which is I feel like the biggest obstacle that I feel like I'm dealing with now that I'm in my 40s is it came with a lot. It came with time, it came with benefit of reflection of a lot of time and a couple of decades under my belt. And that is, the obstacle is myself, unfortunately. Because I think growing up in cowboy country, America, I realized that I had learned these tendencies to subordinate myself in exchanges with other people, either as a woman or as a person of color. Somewhere in there, I had gotten in my head that my opinion or things I wanted to do or the processes I had that I knew were wisdom were not as important as maybe someone, what the rest of the group was thinking, or what other people might have in mind. And I found that, wow, with a couple decades of experience behind me, maybe I know a thing or two, and maybe I should put that to the forefront. And it took a little bit. I'm still a work in progress, but but I find that, I've had to just work at making sure my wisdom and my feelings are put forward, because that in the end does, my representation of myself in a conversation actually makes the conversation better if you could imagine it. So yeah, that would be my answer. Just negating my own training, I guess.
Which I think we do a lot.
Yeah,
we sure do. I'll jump in. So, going back to what you were talking about, Shilpa, in the 2016 election year, definitely a year to remember. For me, seeing all of the news coverage of Latinos being portrayed as, illegal immigrants that are criminals crossing the border to take our jobs, and just a drain on the economy, and like the opposite of what Latinos represent, right? And so I really, really struggled with, clapping back at all of that with negativity, or did I want to again be the change, right? And I had to look up that Cesar Chavez quote because I did not do it justice. It's preservation of one's own culture does not require contempt or disrespect for other cultures. And so I say that because I think, and a lot of us minorities struggle with that anger, right? And do we want to do the same thing that has been done to us? Do we want to brush everybody with that same stroke of hatred, of otherness, of, well, if you're not one of us, right, then you must be our enemy? And I don't think that that is the way to go about things. I think that, for example, doing things like this, this event where we talk about things and we air things out and we talk about what we're doing to affect change and how we can help each other and how we can support each other, and putting forth the imagery of who we really are and not who we've always been told we are and what has always been communicated about us. I think that is much, much more effective and much stronger than coming at the situation with hatred and with the same energy that has been brought upon us. I really firmly believe that. I struggle with it because, you know, it's very easy to get angry and it's very easy to blame and to paint everybody with the same paintbrush. And I think we probably all struggle with that, right? So yeah, for me, the struggle, the thing that I've had to overcome is staying laser focused on doing, on solving, and on not allowing somebody to bring me down to their level, let's say. You know, Michelle Obama's famous quote, right? If they go low, we go higher. It's not as easy as, you know, it is to say, like, yeah, you know, when they go low, we go higher. Rah, rah, yeah. That's great. It's a beautiful thing to say, but it's a really, you know, it's a hard thing to encompass and to do and to take action with. So that has been my struggle. And yeah, that's been mine.
Yeah, I feel like that's a common thing. My dad always used to say to me when I would complain about the kids doing whatever in school, he'd be like, don't worry about them. Don't worry about them. It's about you, your grades, what you do. They can't control your grades. They have nothing to do with you. Your success is built on you. And so don't worry about them. And I was like, oh, like, and now even as an adult, when people are doing, because I got a lot of people actually put barriers in front of me, and people have said to me, but you just keep going around them. I'm like, yeah, because they're not mine. I didn't put it there, so it's not mine. I have to go around that because my dad said, don't worry about that. and that I will say that sometimes it infuriates people because they think that barrier that they put is going to keep you there, and you're like, nah, I got tricks, so I'll be over there while you're over here. We have some questions from the audience. Can you talk about, just jumped as I was reading it. Hold on. Can you talk about a moment when you felt using your communication skills was most effective? Something where you brought these personal, cultural, and professional skills to bear that was really satisfying?
Every single time that I have been able to speak Spanish to someone or translate or help translating for my parents when I was a little kid and they couldn't read my report card. I'll throw that in there.
Were you truthful with your report cards? Because I probably would have lied and been like, nope.
I didn't.
Great.
Ooh, yeah, I'm not sure I can think of a specific instance, but it's sort of the same thing. I think I have, because of that ability to sort of span cross bridges, I kind of have an innate ability to learn languages, oddly, but because of that also, I feel like I have the ability to understand a lot of people with a lot of accents in a way that other people maybe don't. I have this natural translator in my head that allows me to kind of be able to hear people no matter where they're kind of coming from, even if other people in the room can't understand them. So that I've been very grateful for, I think, because again, it just helps people connect in a room, helps everybody talk. So I've been able to be a little bit of a translator, but no specific instances. Of course, as soon as we're off this call, about 3 minutes out, I'll remember, oh yeah, that one thing where I got my parents and that person to talk. That was perfect. But no specific instances at the moment.
For me, I feel like because I'm a dwarf, we have to watch the world in ways that other people don't, because it's not built for us. So my calculations of going up steps, doing like all the things that you guys probably don't think about, I have to make all these calculations to do. And because I make all those calculations just to get around or to do whatever, I see things that other people don't see because I'm always watching. So my friends will be like, I'll say something like, oh, that's getting ready to fall apart. They're getting ready to get in a fight. And my friends are like, you don't know. What are you talking about? I'm like, 2 minutes later, fight breaks out. And they're like, how did you know that? I'm like, because I have to watch and see and think of things that most people don't. Let's see. Okay. There's another hold on. Do you have any resources for journalists, influencers, or independent filmmakers from marginalized communities to get more involved?
I'll jump in with a resource for journalists. So there is an organization for Latinas in journalism that is a great resource. As a matter of fact, if anybody wants information, let me know and I'll post it in the chat. But it's a great resource for Latinas. It shares job opportunities. It shares opportunities for connecting with people who are hiring so that you get a leg up on the competition. And it's just a great community. It shares story ideas and all types of resources for Latina journos. So yeah, if you're interested, it's Latinas in Journalism. Let me know and I'll share it in the notes.
I'm starting the Disabled Journalists Association, so I am the resource at this point because we don't have a website yet, but I have access to a lot of disabled journalists of all colors. So I think Amy and Nancy put my information in the chat box, so you can actually contact me directly, and I can help with all of that. Shilpa?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak as an Asian American filmmaker myself. There are a couple of great Asian American organizations that represent us and promote our work, and we have great film festivals as well. There's the Los Angeles Asian Pacific Film Festival that I've shown my work at a couple of times. And as well as the Indian Film Festival of Los Angeles, and then the New York Indian Film Festival, and New York Asian Pacific. The Coalition for Asian Pacifics in Entertainment is a great organization that fosters Asian American talent, and I believe they have some fellowships and residencies, that kind of thing, every year, as well as Visual Communications. Is an Asian, I believe, in Los Angeles, based on the West Coast, or they might be San Francisco, actually. Sorry, and they foster Asian American talent, and they have things like fellowships, programs, situations in which they actually bring in talent and teach them, help them make films. They're all great organizations, and keep an eye out for those film festivals. The Indian Film Festival in New York. Or the Indo-American Arts Council in New York hosts a lot of different cultural events that are Indian American. And yeah, I mean, there's Those are, I'd say, look out for the film festivals, because that's where you can grab all and see all the fresh new talent that is coming up, especially in New York and LA. They've really got a good eye. Those festivals have a really good eye for picking great voices to foster.
Oh, Kara, you're muted.
Next question. Sorry. What can we do as allies to help support get more representation in the media?
Well, I'd say as an audience member, buy our work, see our movies, see our talent, even if it's John Leguizamo or the next new Latino big actor, go put your money towards our talent, because the more those distributors get money for talent that is minority or underrepresented, the more they will learn to distribute that work. So if they get money, they'll make more. Pay the distributors, they'll make more. And then, if you're in making media and making this, hire minority talent, hire underrepresented talent, hire more women. Like I said, it's like 3% of creative directors in agencies. Come on, guys. Come on. How, if for the fact that women still have 80% of the buying spending power with for all consumers, there is no reason we can't be making our own content and advertising directed toward us. So it's silly. So hire underrepresented, hire minority, see past the borders and find the talent that's great and bring them in so that they can, write for us.
Yeah, I will also say, like, I had a lot of friends who Crip Camp came out like 2 years ago, I think.
Yeah,
and
it was a great movie.
It's an amazing movie. And I kept telling all my friends, go watch it. And they're like, I don't want to be sad. I'm like, who said it was sad? Like, just go watch it. And like, part of the reason why like movies like Crip Camp don't get made is because y'all won't watch it.
Yeah.
And you're missing out.
Yeah. Like, if people say don't want, just watch it. If you watch it, more people will watch it. Put your money there and it'll keep getting made. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's true. That's the whole point. And like, it got nominated for an Oscar and lost to an octopus.
Oh, that's right.
It lost to an octopus. A story about a guy who had a love affair with an octopus. Meanwhile, Crip Camp was about the disability civil rights movement.
Yeah.
That partnered with the Black Panthers.
Yeah.
And it lost to an octopus. Like, and it's because they didn't watch it. Because they were worried it would make them feel bad. And so that's just go watch the stuff. Because film and TV, journalism, all of these industries in the media, advertising, it's all a numbers money game. So if you're not putting your money there, they read that as y'all don't want it, and they're in the business of taking your money. So if you don't give it to them focused on us, they're not going to make any more.
They're not going to make it. Which, by the way, as a side note, I've got to hand it to Sundance, because I think Sundance kind of picked up that film first and showed it and promoted it. And sometimes I can really knock Sundance for their choices, but they have kind of always fostered truly independent and underrepresented voices, and I think was a very amazing choice for them.
Yeah.
They're going on about the octopus in chat.
Stupid octopus. Sorry, it's like it was.
How do you feel about that?
I love Crip Camp. That fired me up when I saw it. I came out of there just like.
Also, it was the first time the Oscars ever had an accessible stage. In like
Wow.
70 some odd
Good
years, it
job,
was the
Academy.
first time they'd ever built a ramp on the stage. And then, so thinking about that, like, what would that have done if it had won the Oscar? Like, what are the doors that would have opened for other filmmakers? Because they were already putting the effort out. They put a ramp up, which they've never done before. Like, that would have proven to everyone, okay, we can make money on them. And it's, when you mentioned Sundance, my mom and I watched Sundance from the living room because we could do it virtually, which also makes it accessible for disabled people. But we paid a little bit of money to watch that and watched so many amazing documentaries and movies that now I feel like because we spent that money and because other people spent that money, some of those things are being made now. Which maybe they wouldn't have been if things hadn't been virtual and more people hadn't been able to get to it. So think about those things when you're in your local communities, making things virtual, because you're opening the doors to, it's not just, when we think of disability in particular, we think of, and I'm not trying to hijack this into a disability conversation, but when we think of disability, we think of it as like people in wheelchairs and others, whereas disability is really old people too. Like when you make things inaccessible, you make it hard for old people, you make it hard for disabled people, you make it hard for the families of all these people, and you're leaving money on the table, but you can say that for any of our different marginalizations. You're leaving money on the table when you try to be exclusive. And I thought that's what this country was about, was making money.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. There's a market. You just got to make content for it.
Right. And I feel like your work is so built into that, is like connecting.
Exactly.
Like here's all these Latino stories and Latina stories, and they're not
insane. It's insane to me because I work with brands to connect them to multicultural consumers, right? So the brands know the power of the multicultural consumer. They get it. It's everybody else in media that is like clueless, because I don't understand where the disconnect is. Just Latinos alone represent 3 trillion in GDP. If we were our own country, just in the US, if we were our own country, we'd be like 6th or 7th behind, Italy and Spain. That's the buying power of just one diverse community within this country. And as a proud, happy capitalist, I cannot understand why the movie industry and the media industry aren't like in tow with that, because the consumers are there. And so we just need to prove them wrong. We really do. As consumers, we need to consume all of the diversity in film that we possibly can so that we can prove them wrong, because there's such a disconnect there. There really is.
Yeah. Because I looked up, because I train a lot of newsrooms as part of my job, and I looked up the numbers for disability, and whenever I throw this number out, the whole newsroom kind of like their mouths gape open. I'm like, in America alone, companies leave about $14.5 billion in disability money on the table. Like, they don't seek it, it's not spent, but they know that there's about $14.5 billion of discretionary fund that's not being spent on products. If I were a company, I'd be headed for that, like, because that all of these communities have been underrepresented for so long that the minute you show some support, build some, products, focus on them, they're grateful and they give you their money.
Yeah.
Like, we're an easier target, and that's what I don't understand why I'm lazy. Go for the easy target. Like, it's an easy target. They need this. Give it to them. Like, why are you, like, always at CNN, they're always like, we're searching for the white dudes between 40 and 67. Why? Everyone's searching for that. Go somewhere else.
We have money too. Asian Americans have money too.
Right.
We want to
Like,
spend it.
I don't know. It just doesn't seem very, like, effective capitalism. Like, what?
Yeah.
Well, and and some entities do get it, right? And so you see things like the success of Encanto, the Disney movie about the Colombian family.
Yeah.
I mean, that was outrageously successful, right? The song, the Bruno song, like, killed the Frozen song as far as, like, the record.
Wow.
Yeah,
I knew
and
that.
then
Wow.
also Coco. Coco was immensely successful.
Loved Coco.
And so, like, it's there. There's the proof. People go crazy over the movies. So, and those are just animated features.
Right.
So it's there. The proof is there.
It's always there. It feels like there's a lack of imagination of how to get it. And I think that's sort of what you were talking about before about diversity. It's like, that's why you got to hire us, because we're the key. We're the key to it.
Yeah.
You guys have never experienced it. You don't know it. So you don't know how to communicate with these communities. So stop doing, like, hire us, and then we can help you. And not only help you with our own communities, because I feel like you don't need to be pigeonholed. Like, people ask me, oh, you've always done disability reporting. No, honestly, I really wanted to write about fashion. Disability was not something that I thought about writing about until I got pushed out of everything else. And then I was like, well, I guess I have to clear this road in order for me to get there. But if you hire us, all of your coverage, all of your movies, everything will get better.
Yeah.
Because they're just more truthful stories, and there's different perspectives on, like, when I see something that happens, I see it through the lens of my experience, and you guys see it through the lens of your experience.
Right.
So if you're telling a story about something that happened in this country, and the only experience that you're getting this perspective from is the white male gaze, you're going to tell the same story over and over again. And it doesn't have to be a particular, like, a Latino story or disability story. We don't live in silos. We live amongst each other. So we should all be able, to your point, we should all be able to tell these stories. But it shouldn't be more of one subset of people telling that story. So that's kind of my thought on that. So if wow, what time is it? Are we over? I think we are a little bit
Yeah,
over.
it's 12:09. Sorry, Pacific. I don't know where you guys are. You're in St. Louis, so it's probably central, right?
Yes, it's 2:09 here. I wonder if the audience has any more questions. We can take them. Otherwise, we can wrap up. But it was so great speaking to both of you. I feel like I learned a lot from both of you, and I had such a great conversation. I'm supposed to do some closing notes. So we're going to go ahead and end this panel, and I want to thank my panelists, or the panelists, they're not mine, personal possession, for coming and speaking so freely. And make sure to check the schedule for other great events. This is just such a powerful several days that you don't want to miss out on anything. There's so many great people coming out to speak and exchanging ideas. But I want to thank Amy and Nancy and the Passionistas for allowing us this time and space to talk.